Picture this. I'm sitting at my dining table, staring down at two identical bowls of homemade chicken soup, steam rising into the air, and my hands are trembling. Just 60 seconds ago, I watched my 17-year-old daughter Emily slip something into one of these bowls when she thought I wasn't looking. Her hand had moved so quickly, so deliberately, hovering over the soup for just a fraction of a second before something dropped from her fingers into the broth. My heart stopped. My mind went blank. And in that split second, every worst-case scenario flooded through my brain like a tidal wave. Was it poison? Some kind of drug? Was my own daughter trying to hurt me? The question that haunted me most was simple and terrifying. Why? I had maybe 10 seconds before she turned around. 10 seconds to make a decision that could change everything. So I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I switched our plates. Now we're both sitting here, about to eat, and she has no idea that the soup she doctored is sitting right in front of her. She's smiling at me, making small talk about her day at school, and I'm watching every movement she makes, every flicker in her eyes, wondering if I'm about to watch my daughter poison herself. What I discovered in the next 30 minutes would completely shatter my understanding of my family, my daughter, and the secret she'd been desperately hiding from me for months. Let me take you back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without context. My name is Michael. I'm 42 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty solid grip on my life. I'm a single dad. I've been for the past 8 years since my wife Rebecca passed away from breast cancer. It's been just Emily and me against the world since she was 9 years old. And I'd like to think we built something special out of that tragedy. We weren't just father and daughter. We were a team, best friends even. Every Sunday, we'd cook dinner together, her specialty being this incredible homemade soup that her mom taught her to make before she died. It was our tradition, our sacred time, the one constant in our busy lives. Emily is, or was, everything you'd want in a teenager. Straight a student captain of the debate team, college applications already submitted to her dream schools. She's brilliant, compassionate, and has this quick wit that reminds me so much of her mother, it sometimes takes my breath away. We talked about everything, or at least I thought we did. She'd tell me about the drama with her friends, the stress of AP classes, her anxieties about leaving for college next year. I made it a point after Rebecca died to keep those lines of communication wide open, to be the kind of parent she could come to with anything. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed, the red flags I was too busy or too blind to notice. About 3 months ago, Emily started spending more time in her room. Not unusual for a teenager, I told myself. Then came the phone calls she'd take in private, stepping out onto the back porch or into the garage, her voice dropping to hushed whispers. When I'd ask who it was, she'd say it was just her friend Sarah, but something about the way she said it felt off. Her appetite changed too. Some nights she'd barely touch her dinner, pushing food around her plate, and other nights she'd eat like she'd been starving for days. I attributed it to teenage metabolism and the stress of senior year. There were the mood swings, sudden and sharp, where my sweet, level-headed daughter would snap at me over nothing, then apologize profusely an hour later with tears in her eyes. I figured it was normal teenage hormones, the pressure of college applications, maybe even some grief bubbling up as she prepared to leave the home she'd shared with her mother. I asked her several times if everything was okay, if she wanted to talk, maybe see her therapist again. She always insisted she was fine, just stressed, just tired, just overwhelmed with school. And I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that something was seriously wrong with my daughter, was too frightening to consider. That Tuesday evening started ordinarily enough. I got home from work around 6, tired from a long day of back-to-back meetings, looking forward to a quiet dinner, and maybe watching a movie with Emily afterward. She was already in the kitchen when I arrived, which immediately struck me as unusual because Tuesday was my night to cook. She said she wanted to surprise me, that she knew I'd had a rough week and she wanted to make my favorite soup, the one her mom used to make. My heart melted. This was the Emily I knew, thoughtful and caring, and I felt guilty for all the worried thoughts I'd been harboring. I hugged her, told her she was the best daughter in the world, and offered to help. She insisted I go relax, said she had everything under control, that I should just sit down and let her take care of dinner for once. So I did. I settled into the living room, scrolling through my phone, half watching the news, listening to the comforting sounds of her moving around the kitchen, the clink of bowls, the bubbling of soup on the stove. Everything felt normal, peaceful even, like maybe I'd been worrying over nothing and we were going to be just fine. Then she called me to the table, and that's when my entire world tilted on its axis. I walked into the dining room expecting nothing more than a simple Tuesday night dinner with my daughter. The table was set beautifully, 2 bowls waiting, spoons placed just so, and a basket of fresh bread Emily had somehow found time to warm up. The smell of chicken soup filled our small house, that rich, comforting aroma that always transported me back to easier times when Rebecca was still alive and our family felt complete. Emily was standing by the stove, ladling soup into the bowls, her back to me, humming softly to herself. It was such a picture of domestic tranquility that I actually paused in the doorway to soak it in, thinking about how lucky I was to have such an amazing kid. She'd put on music, some soft indie playlist she loved, and the evening light streaming through our kitchen window made everything look warm and golden. For just a moment, all my recent worries about her strange behavior melted away. I sat down at my usual spot, the chair that faced the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. Emily didn't know I could see her from this angle. There's a small mirror we keep on the wall near the stove, something Rebecca had hung there years ago so she could keep an eye on things while cooking. Through that mirror, I had a perfect view of what Emily was doing. She had both bowls on the counter, steam rising from them, and she was reaching into her pocket. Her movements were quick, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this moment. Her hand emerged holding something small. I couldn't quite make out what it was from this distance. Maybe a small packet or a vial. My stomach dropped. Time seemed to slow down as I watched her glance over her shoulder toward the dining room, checking to make sure I wasn't watching. Then her hand moved over one of the bowls, hovering there for just a second, and I saw her fingers open. Something fell into the soup, disappearing beneath the surface. She stirred it quickly, just a few rapid swirls with the ladle, then picked up both bowls and turned toward me. My mind was screaming, but my face remained calm. Years of business meetings and negotiations had taught me how to control my expressions, how to hide shock and think clearly under pressure. But inside, I was falling apart. This was my daughter, my Emily, the little girl I'd raised alone for 8 years, the teenager I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, and I'd just watched her put something into my food. The questions crashed over me like waves. What was it? Why would she do this? Was she trying to hurt me? Was this some kind of prank? Was she being influenced by someone? The worst thoughts crept in too, the ones I didn't want to entertain. Poison, drugs, something sinister. My daughter was walking toward me now, carrying both bowls, smiling that sweet smile I'd known since she was born. She placed one bowl in front of me and kept the other for herself, settling into her chair across the table. "I hope it's as good as Mom's," she said, her voice cheerful and light. I followed her recipe exactly. I looked down at the bowl in front of me. It looked perfect, exactly like Rebecca's soup, with chunks of chicken, carrots, celery, all swimming in that golden broth. But somewhere in there, invisible and unknown, was whatever Emily had added. My daughter picked up her spoon, still smiling at me, waiting for me to take the first bite like she always did. She loved watching people taste her cooking, loved that moment of anticipation before the compliment came, but I couldn't move. My hand wouldn't reach for the spoon. All I could think about was what I'd seen, replaying over and over in my mind like a horrible loop. "Dad, are you okay?" Emily asked, her smile fading slightly, concern creeping into her voice. "You look pale. I had to make a decision right now. Confront her? Demand to know what she'd put in the soup? Call someone, the police, maybe poison control? But what if I was wrong? What if I'd misunderstood what I saw? What if there was a perfectly innocent explanation, and I was about to destroy our relationship over nothing?" Then another thought struck me, clear and certain. If there was something dangerous in that soup, I couldn't let her eat it either. Even if she'd put it there herself, even if this was some terrible mistake or moment of madness, I couldn't sit here and watch my daughter hurt herself. "Just thinking about Mom," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "This soup, it just brings back so many memories, you know?" Emily's expression softened immediately, and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me for using her mother's memory as a cover. But I needed time to think, needed a moment to figure out what to do next. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and the genuine warmth in her touch made everything feel even more surreal. How could this caring person sitting across from me have just done what I saw her do? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. "I miss her too," Emily said quietly, and I could see tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "Every single day. I thought making her soup might make us both feel closer to her." She pulled her hand back and wiped at her eyes with her napkin. "I'm going to grab us some water. Be right back." She stood up and walked toward the kitchen, and in that moment, I knew this was my only chance. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were shaking as I reached for her bowl, the one she'd carried to the table, the one that should have been safe. In one swift motion, I switched our bowls, sliding mine across to her place and pulling hers in front of me. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I heard the refrigerator door close, heard Emily's footsteps coming back, and I quickly picked up my spoon, trying to look natural, trying to look like I hadn't just done something that might save my life or doom my daughter. Emily returned with 2 glasses of water and sat back down, completely oblivious to the switch. She picked up her spoon and looked at me expectantly. "Aren't you going to try it?" she asked. This was it. This was the moment of truth. If I was right about what I saw, if there really was something in that soup, then Emily was about to consume it herself. And if I was wrong, if this was all some paranoid delusion or misunderstanding, then I was sitting here being completely insane. I lifted my spoon, dipping it into the soup that Emily had intended for herself, and took a small sip. It tasted exactly like Rebecca's soup, perfect and familiar. No strange flavors or textures that I could detect. But that didn't mean anything. Plenty of substances were tasteless, colorless, undetectable. "It's delicious, sweetheart," I said, and meant it. Whatever else was happening here, Emily had made excellent soup. She beamed at my compliment, then lifted her own spoon to her lips. I watched her take that first bite, watched her swallow, and felt my entire body tense. Was I making a terrible mistake? Should I stop her? Knock the spoon from her hand? But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, watching my daughter eat from the bowl that I'd seen her doctor moments ago. If something was going to happen, it would happen now. Minutes passed. Emily continued eating, chatting between bites about her day at school, some tests she'd aced, some drama between her friends that she found amusing. She seemed completely normal, completely fine. No sudden reactions, no choking or gasping, no signs of distress whatsoever. I barely touched my own soup, managing only a few spoonfuls while Emily finished nearly her entire bowl. "You're not very hungry," she observed, looking slightly disappointed. "Is something wrong with it?" I shook my head quickly. No, it's perfect. I'm just not as hungry as I thought." Big lunch today. Another lie to add to the growing pile. Emily stood up and started clearing the table, and I watched her carefully for any signs that whatever she'd consumed was affecting her. But she moved normally, talked normally, showed no indication that anything was amiss. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe I'd misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe my paranoia and worry about her recent behavior had made me see something that wasn't there. But then, Emily paused at the sink, her hand gripping the edge of the counter. "Dad?" she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. I feel kind of weird. My blood turned to ice. This was it. Whatever she'd put in that soup was starting to work. I was on my feet immediately, moving toward her. "Weird how?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though panic was screaming through every nerve in my body. "What do you feel?" Emily turned to look at me, and her face was pale, confused. "I don't know, just strange. Kind of dizzy, maybe? And my heart is racing." She pressed her hand to her chest. "Did you feel anything like this when you ate?" And there it was, the question that changed everything. "Sit down," I said, guiding Emily back to her chair, my hand on her shoulder, feeling how tense she'd become. "Right now, I need you to tell me exactly what you put in that soup." The words came out harder than I intended, but there was no time for gentle parenting approaches anymore. My daughter's safety was potentially at stake, and I needed answers immediately. Emily's face went from pale to white, all color draining away like someone had pulled a plug. Her eyes widened with a mix of shock and fear, and I watched her mouth open and close several times before any sound came out. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the lie. Her hands started shaking, and she gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. "Dad, I'm not feeling well. Maybe I'm just coming down with something." I pulled out the chair next to her and sat down, forcing myself to look directly into her eyes. Those eyes that were so much like her mother's, it sometimes hurt to look at them. "Emily, I saw you. I saw you put something in one of those bowls when you thought I wasn't looking. I saw it in the mirror by the stove. And then I switched our bowls, so whatever you put in mine, you just ate." The expression that crossed Emily's face in that moment was something I'll never forget. It was pure horror, mixed with disbelief, mixed with a kind of desperate panic that made her look like a cornered animal. "You switched them?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh my God, Dad, you switched them?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How much did I eat? How much of the soup did I eat?" She was starting to hyperventilate, her breathing coming in short, rapid gasps. I stood up too, ready to catch her if she fell, ready to call 911 if needed. "About 3/4 of the bowl," I said, watching her carefully. "Emily, what was it? What did you put in there? Do I need to call poison control? An ambulance?" I pulled out my phone, ready to dial, but Emily grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. No, don't call anyone. Please, Dad, just give me a minute to think." She was pacing now, back and forth across our small dining room, her hands pressed to her head like she was trying to hold herself together. "This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to know. You definitely weren't supposed to switch the bowls. Then tell me what's going on," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Whatever it is, whatever you've done, we can fix it. But I need to know right now what you took." Emily stopped pacing and looked at me, tears streaming down her face now, her whole body shaking. "It wasn't poison, Dad. I swear it wasn't anything like that. I wasn't trying to hurt you." She sank back down into her chair, burying her face in her hands. "I was trying to help you. At least, that's what I thought I was doing." "Help me?" I echoed, completely bewildered. "Help me with what?" "Emily, you're not making any sense." I sat back down next to her, close enough to touch but giving her space to breathe, to collect her thoughts. My mind was racing through possibilities, each one stranger than the last. What kind of help required secretly drugging someone's food? What could possibly justify what I'd just witnessed? Emily lifted her head, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand, and took a deep, shuddering breath. It was sleeping medication. Really strong sleeping medication that I got from ... from someone. I was going to make you sleep through the night deeply, so you wouldn't wake up no matter what. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt my confusion deepen rather than clear. You were going to drug me to sleep? Why? Emily, this doesn't make any sense. If I'm keeping you awake or something, you could have just talked to me. We could have figured something out. But even as I said it, I knew it had to be more than that. You don't secretly drug your father over snoring or a television being too loud. There was something bigger here, something Emily had been hiding, and we were finally, terrifyingly, approaching the truth. I need you to promise me something first, Emily said, her voice stronger now, more determined despite the tears still falling. I need you to promise that you'll listen to the whole story before you react. Before you get angry or call anyone or make any decisions. Can you promise me that, Dad? Please? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't fully recognize anymore. When had she become this person who kept secrets, who made plans that involved drugging people, who looked at me with such fear and desperation? I promise, I said, because what else could I say? I'll listen to everything. But Emily, if you're in danger, if someone is hurting you or making you do things, that promise goes out the window. Your safety comes first, always. Emily nodded, accepting my condition, and then she started talking. Do you remember about 4 months ago, when I started that new after-school program? The one I told you was for college prep and leadership development? I nodded slowly, remembering how excited she'd been about it, how she'd said it would look great on her applications. It wasn't a college prep program, Dad. That was a lie. I'd been going to group therapy sessions for teenagers dealing with anxiety and depression. The words hit me like a physical blow. My daughter had been in therapy for 4 months, and I'd had no idea. I'd been living in the same house with her, eating meals with her, talking to her every day, and I completely missed that she was struggling so badly she needed professional help. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Emily, you know I would have supported you. We've talked about mental health, about how important it is to get help when you need it. Your mom saw a therapist. I've seen therapists. There's no shame in it. Emily was shaking her head before I even finished. I know all that, Dad. I know you would have been supportive. That's not why I didn't tell you. She twisted her hands together in her lap, a nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, but never really understood the depth of anxiety behind it. Then why? I pressed, trying to keep my tone gentle, but needing to understand. Emily took another deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was so quiet I had to lean in to hear her. Because I knew if I told you I was struggling, you'd blame yourself. You'd think you'd failed as a parent, that you hadn't done enough since Mom died, that you'd somehow broken me by not being both mother and father perfectly. And Dad, you've sacrificed so much for me already. You turned down that promotion 3 years ago because it would have meant more travel and less time with me. You've structured your entire life around making sure I'm okay. I couldn't bear to add to that burden to make you feel like all your effort hadn't been enough. The truth of her words cut deeper than any accusation could have. She was right. I would have blamed myself. I probably would have spiraled into guilt and self-recrimination, questioned every decision I'd made since Rebecca died. But hearing her say that she'd hidden her pain to protect me, to spare my feelings, made me realize how badly I'd failed in an entirely different way. I decreated an environment where my daughter felt she could. I'll be honest about struggling because she was too worried about my emotional state. Sweetheart, that's not your job, I said, reaching out to take her hand. Taking care of my feelings is not your responsibility. You're the kid here. I'm the parent. Your job is to tell me when you're hurting so I can help you. I know that intellectually, Emily said, squeezing my hand back. But knowing it and feeling it are two different things. After Mom died, we became this team, remember? Use against the world. And I watched you grieve and struggle and try so hard to be everything I needed. I saw how much it cost you. So when I started having panic attacks last year, when I couldn't sleep because my mind wouldn't stop racing with worst-case scenarios, when I started feeling this overwhelming sadness that had no specific because I couldn't bring myself to add that to your plate. She paused, wiping at fresh tears. The school counselor noticed I was struggling and recommended the therapy group. They had a program that billed it as college prep to parents for kids who wanted to keep their therapy private. So I took it. I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Hurt that she had entrusted me enough to tell me. Guilt that I'd made her feel she couldn't. Pride that she'd recognized she needed help and sought it out. And anger at a system that helped teenagers hide mental health treatment from their parents, even well-meaning ones. Okay, I said slowly, processing this information. Okay, so you've been in therapy for anxiety and depression. That explains the mood swings, the behavior changes I'd noticed. But Emily, it doesn't explain tonight. It doesn't explain why you felt you needed to drug me to sleep. What does your therapy have to do with the soup? Emily pulled her hand away from mine and stood up again, moving to the window. She stared out at our backyard, her back to me, and I could see her shoulders rise and fall with heavy breaths. The therapy has been helping, she said. I've been learning coping mechanisms, understanding my triggers, processing grief I didn't even realize I'd been suppressing. But about 6 weeks ago, I started having these nightmares. Terrible, vivid nightmares about losing you the way we lost Mom. In the dreams, you'd be dying and I couldn't save you. Or you'd already be dead and I'd find you. Or I'd be at your funeral. They were so real, Dad. So incredibly real that I'd wake up crying, heart pounding, and have to come check on you to make sure you were actually alive. The revelation sent a chill through me. You've been checking on me at night? I asked, pieces starting to fall into place. The creaking floorboards I'd heard, the sense sometimes of not being quite alone, the door to my bedroom that would be slightly more open than I'd left it. Emily nodded, still facing the window. Almost every night for the past month and a half, I'd wake up from these nightmares, sometimes 2 or 3 times a night, and I couldn't calm down until I saw you breathing. At first, I'd just peek in your door from the hallway. But then you started waking up when I'd check on you, asking if everything was okay, and I'd have to make up excuses. I said I heard noises, or I was getting water, or I couldn't sleep. You started looking so tired, Dad. I was disrupting your sleep on top of everything else. So you decided to drug me so you could check on me without waking me up. I said, the full picture finally emerging. It was insane and heartbreaking and strangely logical all at once. Emily turned from the window to face me, and the expression on her face was one of complete desperation. I know how it sounds. I know it's wrong. My therapist would be horrified if she knew. But Dad, I was falling apart. The lack of sleep was making my anxiety worse, which was making the nightmares more frequent, which was making me more sleep-deprived. It was this horrible cycle I couldn't break. Where did you even get sleeping medication strong enough to knock someone out? I asked, my mind still reeling from everything Emily had revealed. This wasn't just a teenage mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a planned action, something she'd thought through enough to acquire drugs from somewhere. Emily's face flushed with shame. There's a girl in my therapy group, Madison. Her mom has chronic insomnia and has a prescription for really strong sleeping pills. Madison sometimes takes them herself when her anxiety gets really bad, even though they're not prescribed to her. I told her I was having trouble sleeping, that the anxiety was keeping me awake. She gave me 3 pills, said they'd knock me out for 8 hours solid, and you were going to give one to me. I said, the reality of how far my daughter had gone sinking in. Emily, do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Those medications are prescribed for specific people at specific doses. You don't know how I might react, if I'm allergic, if it could interact with anything else in my system. You could have seriously hurt me. Even as I said it, though, I realized the bitter irony. She'd hurt herself instead by consuming the very drug she'd meant for me. How are you feeling right now? We might actually need to call poison control or your doctor. Emily shook her head, moving back to her chair and sitting down heavily. I looked it up. One pill shouldn't be dangerous for someone my size, just really sedating. I'm already starting to feel it, actually. Kind of floaty and disconnected, like everything is happening through a fog. It's not unpleasant, exactly, just strange. She looked at me with eyes that were already starting to look glazed and unfocused. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I had it all planned out. You were supposed to eat the soup, get really drowsy during the movie we were going to watch, and then go to bed early. You'd sleep deeply through the night. I could check on you as many times as I needed without disturbing you. And tomorrow you'd wake up feeling actually rested for once. You'd never know, and I could finally get some peace. Except I did know, I said quietly, because I happened to catch you in the mirror. And now you're the one who's drugged, and I'm the one sitting here watching you, and everything you were afraid of is happening anyway. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on either of us. Emily let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I can't even drug my own father properly. I'm such a mess, Dad. I'm broken and I don't know how to fix myself. The words were starting to slur slightly, the medication clearly taking stronger effect now. I moved my chair closer to hers, putting my arm around her shoulders. You're not broken, sweetheart. You're hurting and you're struggling, and you made some really poor choices because of that. But you're not broken. I held her as she leaned against me, her body becoming heavier as the drug pulled her towards sleep. We're going to get through this together, okay? But no more secrets. No more hiding how bad things are. And definitely no more drugging people. Not even yourself. That girl Madison who gave you these pills. That needs to be reported to someone at the therapy program. This is dangerous, Emily. I know, she mumbled against my shoulder. I know it was stupid. I know it was wrong. I just didn't know what else to do. The nightmares, Dad, they feel so real. Every night I'm convinced I'm going to lose you, and I can't handle that. I can't lose you like we lost Mom. You're all I have left. Her words were getting more disconnected now, her thoughts fragmenting as the medication took hold. Promise me you won't die. Promise me you'll be okay. It was the plea of a child, reduced to her most basic fear by both emotional distress and chemical sedation. I promise I'm going to do everything I can to stick around for a very long time, I said, knowing it was the only promise I could honestly make. But Emily, listen to me. This is important. These nightmares, this level of anxiety about losing me, that's not something we can handle on our own anymore. This is bigger than what your group therapy can address. We need to get you more intensive help. Maybe a psychiatrist who can evaluate if medication might help. Maybe more frequent individual therapy sessions. Will you let me help you with that? I felt her nod against my shoulder, though I wasn't sure how much she was actually processing at this point. I'm so tired, Dad, Emily whispered, her eyes closing. I'm tired of being scared all the time. Tired of the nightmares. Tired of worrying about everything. Can we fix it? Can someone actually fix what's wrong with me? The vulnerability in her voice made my heart ache. This was my little girl, the one I'd read bedtime stories to and pushed on swings and taught to ride a bike. Somewhere along the way, while I'd been so focused on making sure she had everything she needed materially and educationally, I'd missed that she was drowning emotionally. Yes, I said firmly, even though I knew recovery wasn't that simple. Yes, we can fix this. It's going to take time and work, and probably won't be easy, but we're going to get you through this. You're not alone in this, Emily. You've never been alone in this, even though I know it felt that way. I shifted her weight as she became more limp, clearly losing the fight against the medication. Right now, I need to get you to bed. Tomorrow, we're going to call your therapist together and tell them everything that happened. Then we're going to find you the additional help you need. But tonight, you're going to sleep, and I'm going to be right here making sure you're safe. Getting Emily upstairs to her bedroom was more challenging than I'd anticipated. She was barely conscious at this point, her legs unsteady, her words reduced to mumbles that I couldn't quite make out. I half-carried, half-guided her up the stairs, my mind racing through everything that had been revealed in the past hour. My daughter had been silently suffering for months, secretly attending therapy, experiencing debilitating nightmares, and had ultimately made the desperate decision to drug me so she could check on me without disruption. And I'd been completely oblivious to the depth of her struggle. I got her into her room and helped her onto the bed, pulling off her shoes and covering her with her favorite blanket, the one Rebecca had made when Emily was just a baby. "Stay," Emily mumbled, her hand weakly grasping at my sleeve. "Don't leave." "What if I don't wake up?" There was real fear in her voice, even through the fog of medication. I sat on the edge of her bed, the same way I had when she was small and afraid of monsters under the bed or thunder outside her window. "I'm not going anywhere," I assured her. "I'm going to stay right here and make sure you're okay. You're going to wake up tomorrow morning, probably with a headache and feeling groggy, but you're going to be fine. You promise?" she asked, her eyes already closed, her breathing starting to deepen. "I promise," I said, smoothing her hair back from her face the way I'd done 1,000 times before. Within minutes, she was fully asleep, her breathing steady and deep. I sat there watching her, this person who was somehow still my little girl, but also a young woman I was realizing I didn't know as well as I thought I did. How had I missed the signs? Looking back now with this new context, so many things made sense. The exhaustion, the mood swings, the withdrawal, the strange hours. But in the moment, I'd explained them all away, attributed them to normal teenage behavior and stress. I pulled out my phone and quickly researched the medication Madison had given Emily. The dosage she'd taken was within safe limits for her weight, though definitely higher than would normally be prescribed for a first-time user. She'd likely sleep for 8 to 10 hours and wake up disoriented and groggy. I set an alarm to check on her every hour, making sure her breathing remained steady and she was responding to stimuli. Then I settled into the chair in the corner of her room, the same chair I'd spent countless nights in when she was a baby, watching her sleep and marveling at this tiny human I was responsible for keeping alive. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Emily had wanted to drug me so she could watch me sleep and assure herself I was still alive. Instead, I was watching her sleep, making sure she was still alive after she'd accidentally drugged herself. We were both prisoners of our fears, both trying to protect each other in ways that were ultimately harmful. Rebecca would have known what to do. She'd always been better at the emotional stuff, better at reading people's moods and needs. When she was sick, before the end, she'd made me promise I'd take care of Emily, make sure she grew up happy and healthy and strong. I'd thought I'd been keeping that promise. Clearly, I'd been wrong. My phone buzzed with a text, and I glanced at it to see a message from my brother asking if we were still on for our weekly call tomorrow. Normal life, continuing as if everything hadn't just shifted fundamentally in the past few hours. I couldn't respond right now. Couldn't pretend everything was fine or explain what had happened in a text message. I turned my phone face down and returned my attention to Emily. She stirred slightly in her sleep, mumbling something I couldn't make out, and I found myself moving back to the bed, sitting on the edge again, wanting to be close in case she needed me. The hours passed slowly. I watched Emily sleep, checked her breathing and responsiveness on schedule, and thought about everything that needed to happen next. We'd need to contact our therapist first thing in the morning. I need to find a psychiatrist who specialized in adolescent anxiety and trauma. We need to have serious conversations about trust and communication and how badly we both failed at those things despite our best intentions. And somehow, we need to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty, even when that honesty was hard or painful. Around midnight, Emily stirred more significantly, rolling over and opening her eyes briefly. "Dad," she said, her voice thick with sleep and medication. "I'm here," I said immediately, leaning closer so she could see me without having to fully wake. "Everything's okay. You're safe. Just go back to sleep." She blinked at me slowly, her eyes struggling to focus. "I had a nightmare. You were gone." The fear in her voice was palpable, even in her drugged state. "I'm right here," I repeated, taking her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here when you wake up in the morning. I promise." That seemed to satisfy her, and her eyes drifted closed again, her hand relaxing in mine. I stayed there, holding her hand the way I had when she was small and afraid, and thought about all the ways love could manifest as fear and fear as love, and how easily the two could become tangled together until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Emily loved me so much that she was terrified of losing me. I loved her so much that I'd tried to protect her from every hardship, including my own pain after Rebecca died. And in trying to protect each other, we'd somehow created this situation where we were both drowning in our own private fears, unable to reach out to each other for help. The sun was streaming through Emily's curtains when she finally began to wake up properly. It was almost 9 in the morning, nearly 12 hours since she'd eaten the drugged soup. I'd managed maybe an hour of sleep total, dozing fitfully in the chair with my alarm set to wake me for regular checks. My back was aching, my eyes felt like sandpaper, and I desperately needed coffee, but none of that mattered. Emily was stirring, her eyes fluttering open, confusion spreading across her face as she tried to orient herself. "Dad?" She croaked, her voice rough from sleep. "What time is it? Why are you in my room?" She pushed herself up to sitting, wincing as the movement made her head swim. "Oh no. Oh God. Last night. That all really happened, didn't it?" The hope in her voice that maybe it had all been a dream was heartbreaking. I stood up from the chair, every muscle protesting, and moved to sit on the edge of her bed. "Yeah, sweetheart. It all really happened. How are you feeling?" Emily pressed her hands to her head, closing her eyes against what was clearly a pounding headache. "Like I got hit by a truck. Everything's fuzzy and my head is killing me, and I feel kind of nauseous." She opened her eyes and looked at me, really looked at me, taking in my rumpled clothes and exhausted face. "Did you stay here all night?" When I nodded, fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything. For lying to you, for trying to drug you, for all of it. I know saying sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, but I don't know what else to say. Let's get you some water and something for that headache," I said, standing up. "Then, we need to have a long talk about everything. But first, basics. Can you stand? Do you feel dizzy?" Emily swung her legs over the side of the bed carefully, testing her balance before standing. She swayed slightly but remained upright. "I'm okay." Shaky, but okay. I followed her to the bathroom, waiting outside while she took care of necessities, ready to help if she needed it. When she emerged, she looked a bit more alert, though still clearly suffering from the after effects of the medication. We made our way downstairs to the kitchen, and I got her settled at the table with water and ibuprofen while I made coffee for myself and toast for both of us. The mundane normalcy of these actions felt surreal after the intensity of the previous night. Emily sipped her water slowly, watching me move around the kitchen with an expression that was part guilt, part fear, part exhaustion. "Are you going to send me away?" she asked quietly. "To some kind of hospital or treatment center? I know what I did was really messed up. If you think I need to be somewhere, I'll understand." The question caught me off guard. I set down the coffee pot and turned to face her fully. Is that what you're afraid of? That I'm going to ship you off somewhere? Emily shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant but failing miserably. I drugged you, Dad, or tried to. That's pretty serious. I wouldn't blame you if you thought I was dangerous or unstable or something. I carried our toast over and sat down across from her, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. Emily, you're not dangerous. You're struggling with serious anxiety and trauma, and you made a very poor decision out of desperation. Those are not the same thing as being unstable or a danger to yourself or others. But what if I am? Emily said, her voice breaking. What if there's something really wrong with me? What if I'm broken in a way that can't be fixed? She was crying now, tears running down her face as all the fear and pain she'd been holding inside came pouring out. The nightmares are getting worse, not better. The therapy isn't helping enough. I feel like I am drowning all the time, and I can't breathe, and I don't know how to make it stop. Last night, when I decided to put those pills in your soup, I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway because I was so desperate for just one night where I could feel safe. What kind of person does that make me? I moved around the table to sit next to her, pulling her into a hug while she sobbed against my shoulder. It makes you human, sweetheart. It makes you someone who's in pain and reached for the wrong solution because you couldn't see any other options. But we're going to find you better options, I promise. Real solutions, not desperate measures. I held her until the sobs subsided into hiccups, then pulled back to look at her face. Today, we're going to call your therapist and tell them everything that happened. Then we're going to find you a psychiatrist who can evaluate whether medication might help with the anxiety. And we're going to look into more intensive therapy options, maybe individual sessions in addition to your group. What if it doesn't help? Emily asked, wiping at her face with her sleeve. What if nothing helps and I'm just stuck feeling like this forever? It was the fear beneath all the other fears. The terror that her pain was permanent and unfixable. Then we keep trying different things until we find what works, I said firmly. Therapy, medication, different types of treatment, whatever it takes. Recovery isn't linear, sweetheart. There are going to be setbacks and hard days and times when it feels like nothing is working. But you don't have to go through it alone anymore. No more hiding, no more pretending everything is fine when it's not. We're going to face this together, as a team, the way we should have been doing all along. After Emily had eaten something and taken a shower, feeling slightly more human, we sat down together at the kitchen table with her phone. The first call we needed to make was to her therapy group leader, Dr. Sarah Chen. Emily's hands were shaking as she held the phone, and I could see the fear in her eyes at having to confess what she'd done. What if she kicks me out of the group? Emily asked. What if she tells the school? What if I get in real trouble? Whatever happens, we'll deal with it, I assured her. But Emily, Dr. Chun needs to know that students in her group are sharing prescription medications. That's a serious safety issue beyond just what happened with you. Emily nodded reluctantly and dialed the number. Dr. Chun answered after 2 rings, and Emily put the phone on speaker so I could hear as well. Hi, Dr. Chun. This is Emily. I need to tell you about something that happened last night. Her voice wavered but held steady as she launched into the story. To her credit, Dr. Chen listened without interruption until Emily had finished the whole account. There was a long pause after Emily went silent, and I could almost hear the therapist processing everything she'd just heard. Emily, thank you for telling me this. I know that couldn't have been easy, Dr. Chen finally said, her voice carefully neutral. First question, are you safe right now? Are you with your father? Emily confirmed that I was right there with her, and I added my own confirmation. Good. Emily, I want you to know that you're not in trouble with me, but we do need to talk about several serious issues here. Dr. Chun went on to explain that she would need to file a report about Madison sharing prescription medication, not to punish anyone, but to ensure everyone's safety. She asked detailed questions about how Emily was feeling physically, whether we'd considered getting medical attention, and what our plan was moving forward. When Emily mentioned that we were planning to seek additional help, including a psychiatric evaluation, Dr. Chen immediately offered several referrals. "Emily, I've been concerned about the severity of your anxiety for a few weeks now," she said gently. "I was actually planning to recommend we have a conversation with your father about stepping up your care. I'm glad that's happening, even though I wish it had been under different circumstances." The conversation lasted nearly an hour, covering everything from immediate safety concerns to long-term treatment plans. Dr. Chun made. Emily promised to check in with her later that week and scheduled an individual session to process everything that had happened. She also gently but firmly explained that Madison would need to have a conversation with her parents about the medication sharing, and that there would likely be consequences within the therapy group. "Actions have consequences, even when they come from a place of pain or desperation," Dr. Chun said. "But consequences don't mean you're a bad person or beyond help. They're part of the learning and healing process." After we hung up, Emily looked drained but also oddly relieved. "That went better than I expected," she admitted. "I thought she'd be angrier." I poured us both more coffee, decaf for Emily given what she'd already put her system through. Dr. Chun is a professional. She understands that people in crisis make poor decisions. The question now is what we do next. I pulled out a notepad and pen. Let's make a list of everything we need to handle, and then we'll prioritize and tackle them one at a time. Together, we created a comprehensive list. Finding a psychiatrist, scheduling more frequent therapy, talking to Emily's school counselor about what support might be available there, discussing with Dr. Chen whether Emily should continue in the group therapy or switch to primarily individual sessions, and having ongoing family conversations about communication and trust. We also talked about practical immediate changes, like Emily coming to get me directly if she had a nightmare rather than checking on me secretly, and establishing a check-in routine where we both committed to being honest about how we were really doing. "I need to take some responsibility here too," I said, setting down the pen. "I created an environment where you felt you couldn't tell me you were struggling because you were worried about my feelings. That's on me, Emily. I should have made it clearer that your well-being comes before my comfort. Always." Emily was shaking her head before I finished. "Dad, no. You've been amazing. I'm the one who decided to hide things. You did everything right. I clearly didn't, or you would have felt you could come to me when things got bad," I countered. "We both made mistakes here, sweetheart. You made the mistake of hiding your pain and ultimately making a really dangerous choice. I made the mistake of being so focused on appearing strong for you that I inadvertently taught you that you had to be strong for me. We're both going to have to learn how to be more honest with each other, even when that honesty is uncomfortable." Emily considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, so how do we do that? How do we learn to be honest when we've been doing the opposite for so long?" It was a good question, and one I didn't have a complete answer for. "I think we start small," I suggested. "Every day, we each share one thing we're struggling with or worried about, no matter how minor it seems. We practice being vulnerable with each other until it becomes more natural." Emily smiled slightly, the first real smile I'd seen from her since before the soup incident. "I can try that. I'm worried right now that you hate me and will never trust me again, and that I've ruined our relationship forever. That's what I'm struggling with today. The raw honesty of it hit me hard. I don't hate you, Emily. I could never hate you. Am I hurt and scared and confused? Absolutely. Do I have questions about trust and judgment? Yes. But hate you? Never. You're my daughter, and I love you unconditionally, even when you make terrible choices." I paused, thinking about my own vulnerability. What I'm struggling with today is guilt. Guilt that I didn't see how bad things had gotten for you. Guilt that I somehow made you feel you couldn't tell me. And fear that I failed you as a parent in some fundamental way. We sat there in the kitchen, Two people who loved each other desperately, but had somehow lost the ability to truly communicate that love, trying to find our way back to each other. It wasn't a perfect moment. Emily was still dealing with the physical aftermath of the medication. I was exhausted and emotionally wrung out. We both had puffy eyes from crying and hadn't eaten a proper meal in almost 24 hours. But it was honest, and honesty was where we needed to start. Over the next few days, our house became a hub of appointments and difficult conversations. We met with Dr. Patricia Morrison, a psychiatrist who specialized in adolescent anxiety disorders, and Emily opened up about the full extent of her symptoms. Dr. Morrison was methodical and compassionate, asking detailed questions about Emily's sleep patterns, the frequency and intensity of her panic attacks, her ability to concentrate at school, and the content of her nightmares. She also spoke with me privately about what I'd observed and Emily's family history of mental health, including Rebecca's depression during her cancer treatment. After 2 long sessions, Dr. Morrison recommended a combination approach, continuing therapy while starting a low dose of an SSR to help manage the anxiety, along with a different medication specifically for the nightmares. The intrusive thoughts about losing you, the constant checking behaviors, the inability to feel safe even in her own home. These are all symptoms of severe anxiety that's verging into OCD territory, Dr. Morrison explained to us both. The good news is that these conditions are very treatable. The medication should help take the edge off enough that Emily can actually benefit from therapy and develop coping skills. Right now, her anxiety is so high that she's in constant survival mode. Emily was hesitant about medication, worried about side effects and what it meant to need drugs to function normally. We spent a long evening talking about it, and I shared my own experience with medication after. Rebecca died, how it had helped pull me out of a dark place and give me the stability I needed to be there for Emily. There's no shame in needing help, whatever form that help takes, I told her. If you had diabetes, you'd take insulin. This is no different. Your brain chemistry needs some support right now, and that's okay. We also made changes to our daily routine. Emily and I started having breakfast together every morning before school, a time when we check in about how we were each feeling and what challenges we were anticipating for the day. In the evenings, we'd spend at least 30 minutes together without phones or distractions, sometimes talking, sometimes just being in the same room while she did homework and I read. We established a rule that if either of us said, "I need to talk about something hard," the other person had to stop what they were doing and listen without judgment. The nightmares didn't stop immediately, but now when Emily woke up from one, she'd come to my room and wake me up. The first time it happened, about a week after the soup incident, I woke to her standing in my doorway, looking terrified. "I had the dream again," she whispered. "The one where you're gone and I'm alone." Instead of sending her back to bed with reassurances, I made her some chamomile tea, and we sat in the living room together talking about the nightmare and what it represented until she felt calm enough to try sleeping again. "I know it's inconvenient to have me wake you up," Emily said one of those nights, curled up in the armchair with her tea. "I know you have work in the morning and need your sleep." I shook my head firmly. "This is what I'm here for, Emily. Being your father doesn't stop being my top priority just because you read almost 18 or because it's S3 in the morning. You're not an inconvenience. You're my daughter, and helping you through hard times is literally my job." School became another challenge we had to navigate together. Emily's grades had been slipping without my realizing it, the anxiety making it hard for her to concentrate on assignments or study for tests. We met with her guidance counselor and teachers to explain, in general terms, that Emily was dealing with some mental health challenges and might need some accommodations while she got treatment. Our AP English teacher was particularly understanding, sharing that her own daughter had struggled with anxiety in high school. The most important thing is that Emily knows she's not alone and that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. the teacher said. We also had to deal with the fallout from the Madison situation. Dr. Chun had, as promised, spoken with Madison's parents about the medication sharing. Madison was angry at Emily for telling on her, and the relationship within the therapy group became strained. Emily was hurt and frustrated, feeling like she'd lost a friend who understood what she was going through. She doesn't get that I didn't tell to get her in trouble, Emily said after a particularly tense group session. I told because what we were both doing was dangerous, but she just sees it as betrayal. Sometimes doing the right thing costs us relationships, I said gently. It's painful, but that doesn't make it wrong. Madison is dealing with her own issues and probably feels exposed and vulnerable. That's not your fault, and it doesn't change the fact that telling the truth was the right choice. Over time, Madison did come around somewhat, though they never regained the closeness they'd had. The group itself became more focused on accountability and honest communication, with Dr. Chen implementing new guidelines about discussing risky behaviors and supporting each other in healthier ways. As weeks passed, I started to see small changes in Emily. The medication was helping. She reported that the constant buzz of anxiety in her mind had quieted to a more manageable level. The nightmares became less frequent, though they didn't disappear entirely. She was sleeping better, eating more regularly, and seemed to have more energy for things she'd enjoyed before the anxiety had taken over. She rejoined the debate team, which she'd quietly quit months earlier, and started spending time with friends again instead of isolating in her room. But recovery wasn't linear, and there were still hard days. About a month after the soup incident, I came home to find Emily sitting on the kitchen floor, crying, her phone in her hand. What happened? I asked, immediately dropping my briefcase and sitting beside her. Through tears, she explained that she'd gotten a rejection letter from her top choice college. I know, it's not the end of the world, she sobbed. I know I have other options and it doesn't define me and all the logical things my therapist would say. But right now, I just feel like a failure, and the anxiety voice in my head is telling me this is proof I am not good enough and everything is going to fall apart. Instead of jumping to reassurances or trying to fix her feelings, I just sat with her on the floor. That sounds really painful, I said, and it makes sense that you read disappointed and that the anxiety is using this to attack you. What do you need right now? Emily leaned against me. Just this. Just you being here and not trying to make it better immediately. Can we just sit here for a while? So we did, sitting on the kitchen floor for nearly an hour while Emily processed her feelings and the anxiety slowly loosened its grip. 3 months after the soup incident, Emily and I stood in my bedroom going through boxes of Rebecca's belongings that had been stored in the back of my closet since she died. It was something Emily's therapist had suggested, a way to process grief that we'd both been avoiding. I'm scared I won't remember her clearly, Emily admitted as we opened the first box. It's been 8 years, and some of the memories are getting fuzzy. What if I forget important things about her? I pulled out one of Rebecca's favorite sweaters, the soft blue one she'd worn constantly, and handed it to Emily. That's normal, sweetheart. Memory works that way, especially when we were so young when she died. But we have photos and videos and stories, and we have the parts of her that live on in you. Emily buried her face in the sweater, breathing in deeply even though after 8 years, it couldn't possibly still smell like her mother. Tell me something about Mom that I might not know, she said, her voice muffled by the fabric. We spent hours going through boxes, and I shared stories I'd never told Emily before. About how Rebecca had been terrified of being a mother, convinced she'd mess it up somehow, but had been instantly, fiercely devoted the moment Emily was born. About the silly arguments we'd had and the ways we'd driven each other crazy along with the deep love that underlay everything. About Rebecca's own struggles with depression and anxiety, something I'd kept from Emily when she was younger, but now felt she deserved to know. Mom had anxiety too? Emily asked, surprised. You never told me that. I nodded, pulling out a journal Rebecca had kept during her cancer treatment. She struggled with it most of her adult life, actually. It got worse when she was sick, understandably. But she was in therapy and on medication and managed it well most of the time. I didn't tell you before because you were so young, and I didn't want you to think mental health struggles meant weakness. But now I realize that keeping it from you probably did the opposite. It made you think you were somehow uniquely broken instead of understanding that this runs in families and there's no shame in it. Emily read some of her mother's journal entries, crying as she recognized similar thought patterns and fears to her own. "I wish I could talk to her about this," she said softly. "I wish she could tell me how she dealt with it." I pulled Emily close. "She'd tell you exactly what I'm telling you. Get help. Be honest about what you're feeling, and don't let the anxiety convince you that you're less than you are. She'd be so proud of you for getting treatment and doing the hard work of recovery. And she'd probably smack me upside the head for creating an environment where you felt you could untell me you were struggling." The college acceptances did eventually come, and Emily decided on a school about 2 hours away, close enough to come home when she needed to, but far enough to have real independence. As graduation approached, we had many conversations about managing her anxiety while away at college, about building a support network, about when to push through difficult feelings and when to ask for help. "I'm scared I'm going to fall apart without you there," Emily admitted one evening. "You might have hard times," I acknowledged. "But Emily, you've done the work. You've learned coping skills. You have medication that helps. You know how to ask for help when you need it. And I'm only a phone call away, anytime, day or night. You're not getting rid of me just because you're going to college." We made plans for how we'd stay connected. Video calls twice a week, texts whenever either of us needed to reach out, and a standing invitation for Emily to come home any weekend she wanted or needed to. The night before we packed up her things for college, Emily came into my room late, just like she had so many times after nightmares. But this time, she wasn't scared. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed, "for not giving up on me when I did such a terrible thing, for getting me help instead of punishing me, for showing me that it's okay to not be okay." I sat up, fully awake now. "You don't need to thank me for being your father, Emily. That's just my job." "No," she insisted. "Lots of parents wouldn't have handled it the way you did. Lots of parents would have freaked out or sent me away or made me feel like a monster. You made me feel like a person who made a mistake, not like the mistake defined me. That made all the difference." We hugged, and I felt the weight of the past few months, all the fear and pain and hard work and growth, settle into something like peace. On move-in day at college, as we carried boxes up to Emily's dorm room, I found myself thinking about that night with the soup, about how a single moment had shattered and then rebuilt our relationship. We'd been forced to confront truths we'd both been avoiding, to break down walls we built thinking they were protecting each other. It had been painful and scary, and one of the hardest things either of us had been through. But on the other side of it, we had something stronger and more honest than we'd had before. As I drove away from campus that evening, leaving Emily to start her new chapter, my phone buzzed with a text. "Made it through orientation without a panic attack. Roommate seems nice. Missing you already, but in a good way, not a scary way. Love you, Dad. Thanks for seeing me put that stuff in the soup and caring enough to switch the plates. Saved my life in more ways than one." I pulled over to respond properly, tears blurring my vision. "So proud of you, sweetheart. Remember, I'm always here. You're going to do amazing things. Love you more than you know." The soup incident would always be part of our story, a dark moment that revealed just how much we both needed help we weren't asking for. But it had also been a turning point, the crisis that forced us to face reality and build something better from the broken pieces. Emily was learning to live with her anxiety instead of being controlled by it. I was learning to be vulnerable with my daughter instead of always playing the strong protector. And together, we were learning that love sometimes means having hard conversations, making tough choices, and trusting that honesty, even when it's painful, is always better than comfortable lies. As I drove home to an empty house, I realized I wasn't scared of Emily's independence or our changing relationship. We'd survived something that could have destroyed us, and in doing so, we built a foundation strong enough to withstand whatever came next. The future was uncertain, as it always had been, but now we were facing it with open eyes and honest hearts. And that, I thought, was the best I could hope for either of us.